doctors particularly vulnerable to getting stuck because they spend much of their lives following a prescribed path?
When you're a trainee, the growth pathway is all laid out for you. That path is a lot more murky when you're a GP or consultant. And in fact, there's no path at all. You kind of have to create your own path. There's nothing more isolating when you're in that situation where you feel stuck and you don't feel that people understand you. Often the response was, that's just life, get on with it, it's the same for everyone. If you've attached to just one stream of income, being a doctor, then all of a sudden you don't have any options other than just to work harder, which in my case burnt me out a few years ago.
What does growth look like when you're already successful?
Doctors who feel stuck, the reason why they feel stuck is because they don't have any agency and control into their personal and professional life. So in order to reclaim agency and control, you have to... Before we jump in, I wanted to let you know that the Doctor Reset starts on the 6th of July. If you've been feeling a bit stuck in medicine, or you've got that sense that something needs to change, but you're not quite sure what, I would love you to join us. You'll find the details in the show notes. Now, let's get to today's episode.
Hey, Jamie, good to be back.
Yeah, great to see you again, Fanny.
I'm going to waste no time.
Yeah.
The topic today is why so many doctors feel stuck. But I want to ask you, I want to start with a question. Okay, and the question is, are doctors particularly vulnerable to getting stuck because they spend much of their lives following a prescribed path?
Yeah, what a great way to kick off. Thank you for asking that. So, I'm going to say yes, but that's easy for me to say because I've got the insight. I wouldn't have been saying this a few years ago, but let me just explain if that's okay. So, quite right in what you say. From going from medical school all the way up to let's call it the top of the tree, the top of the ladder. So that might either be a GP and the GP partner, or it might be a hospital consultant. The path is very much laid out for you because you're not having to create your own path. Your full energy and focus is on learning the medical side of things, upskilling, improving your knowledge, improving your skills as a doctor, and everything is around getting more clinically competent so that eventually you're able to look after patients independently. But the path is all laid out to you. Now, what I experienced when I became a consultant in 2015 is that there's a few years of transition into that consultant role where all of a sudden you've got the final degree of responsibility, which you don't have as a trainee. That takes a bit of time to adjust. But then once you have done, all of a sudden you are going to work day on day and there's no path laid out for you. It's very much you're on your own. And you kind of have to create your own path. Now, the traditional medical sense is either you're going to go into medical education, or you might do a bit of research, or you might go down the hospital management pathway. So they're the traditional routes that you are encouraged to follow. But as a consultant, and I can't speak for GP because I'm not one, but as a consultant, it's almost as though the clinical side of things is just you're there for service delivery. I think the fallacy with it is that they say, oh, they'll go down those three traditional paths. Medical education, as consultants, you're educating doctors anyway, right? So I've got a load of trainees that come onto the ward round with me.
Yeah.
And yes, we are looking after patients, but there is training that goes alongside that as well. So I am training doctors as part of my clinical role.
Right.
Hospital management, very, very difficult to escape hospital management completely as a consultant. Because you're there to help drive the service. And then the research side of things, well, the research is an interesting one because as far as I'm concerned, there are proper researchers and they're the ones that are proper academics that have contracts with universities, that they get grants and they bring the money into the university and they do proper research. Or there's this, have you ticked the research box, which if you're not a full-time academic or you haven't got a passion towards academia, then what is research anyway? It just seems to me like it's just a box that you've got to tick. So the point is, all those traditional pathways you're kind of doing already as a consultant. And if you're going to take a formal role in hospital management, that usually results in being a clinical director, or you might do a formal education part. But that, again, is a system thing where there's lots of bureaucracy, there's lots of systems and processes. It kind of all relates to the same thing. And the reason why I mention all this, and I appreciate I've gone off on a tangent, is because it just doesn't suit a lot of doctors. So if it doesn't
No.
suit a lot of doctors, what then happens is that you get completely reactive. And what you're doing is you're coming into work day to day, you're doing your job, you're then trying to contribute in a meaningful way possible, but then you quickly realize that the NHS is not that amenable to new insights, fresh opinions, because it's a cash strapped and resource limited service. And normally, when doctors have got a great idea about something, there's a financial angle which we don't think about as top of mind, but managers do. So it's very easy then to come to work day to day where you feel that you're existing and the.
So hold on, I'm going to interject there because we know we're going to talk about what stuck is, or a bit more what it's like in a minute. But let me go on to this then, because you've talked a bit about this. What does growth look like then when you're already successful?
Well, this is really interesting because when I was at my lowest in 2022, I wasn't growing, and it all depends really. I think on what actually is important to you. Where does growth fit in your core values? And a lot of us don't really think about core values. I certainly didn't. I have recently, because obviously we've been working together and we've got the Doctor's Breakthrough Program where core values comes up within that. But if you're unaware of that growth being an important value of yours, then it's very easy. You go from a trainee where you're learning, you're developing, you're coming across new things. It's almost like a child when you're growing up as a child. The reason why being a child is so exciting is because you're seeing a lot of things for the first time, new experiences, the novelty factor
Yeah.
is really important, and you're developing. And it's the same to a certain extent in medicine. But then all of a sudden, when you get to that consultant level, then you're no longer growing. You're there to serve and fulfill a particular role. And unless you create your own path, it's very easy to become stagnated.
So therefore, what are we saying then? When maybe doctors think that they need maybe a career change, what they're really looking for is a life change?
Well, it depends on how you define life change. What does that mean? I mean, what do you mean by life change?
Well, look, what I'd noticed, and I said this before in our earlier meeting, was that what I see from talking to doctors, and being relatively new to talking to doctors, but talking to quite a lot, is they follow the ladder up a rung at a time, climbing up the ladder. They get to the top, and what they expect to be at the top isn't at the top. I.e., it's a job. And that's what we've been saying, is that you're now a consultant, you wear the badge and you go and you do the job. Now, many of the consultants that I've spoken to do way more than the job, and that then helps them to feel disconnected, undervalued, not paid their worth, etc., tired, and not really doing the things that lights them up, because a lot of those extra duties they're not paid for, or they're doing things that they don't really want to do. But if that pinnacle is a little bit of a full flat place, surely the next space to look is at yourself and where you are and what you're doing, and who you're being in the environment that you now find yourself in. Or is there a situation whereby something like the NHS needs to keep that career progression going, and maybe then they move into leadership training, or, but again, like any corporate company, you're going to have a certain number of people that don't want to be managers. They don't want to be head of departments. They don't want to do this, but actually they're sort of forced to be promoted up the ladder. So we've got to try and ascertain as to what's going on here for, let's say, for the consultant. When GPs we know are very different, but let's say consultant doctors, is where is that space where all of a sudden it goes, you become the person that goes, well, this is a bit crap, isn't it? I'm not having fun here.
I think there's two issues. Okay, the first issue is that when you're a trainee, a lot of your work and your development is related towards the clinical side. So that is the doctor side, the area that the reason why you went into medicine in the first place, and that's to make a difference to patients. When you become a consultant, it's almost as if that job is kind of, we know that you can do that. You're there to serve and to fulfill a role. We're going to put you on the theatre list because that needs to be covered, and you need to be the anaesthetist for that list, and that is your job. That's what you have.
Mm-hmm.
That's kind of great, but that is a job that you are now trained for, and we're not necessarily yes, of course you might go to certain CPD related events, and you're going to go to conferences and courses, but largely you know what you're doing. You don't really
Yeah.
need to get that better because you've got that certificate of completion of training, and that is fine. So therefore, what then happens is that your direction, energy, and focus is more towards being a good leader, being a manager, and contributing to improving the service.
Mm-hmm.
What the challenge with that, and it's no one's fault with this, but the challenge with that is that we all know that the NHS is resource limited and
Yeah.
cash strapped, chronically cash strapped. So whatever input that you want to provide, whether it might be the fact that you see a better way of doing something with the service, if there's any form of cost to it, which usually there is, because usually not just in medicine, but in other business, if you want to develop something that they use there
Yeah.
needs to be some sort of financial outlay. That
Sure.
doesn't happen in the NHS because doctors don't control the financial budget. So what normally then happens is that doctors get increasingly frustrated. And they've got all of these ideas. The system does not recognize those ideas because it doesn't come with a cost saving. In addition to that, there are just layers and layers of paperwork, tick box exercises, bureaucracy. And all of a sudden, and this is what I recognize, your time and energy is more. I mean, we talked about energy before this call. The system that you're in, it just sucks your energy away. Everything is an uphill battle.
Mm-hmm.
Everything becomes it's just wading through treacle half the time.
And
And
is
and the
that
other
the
thing
point?
to say, that's one thing. And then it's very easy in that situation then to start losing your sense of purpose. We all went into medicine
Mm.
because we want to make a difference to patients. So that's a really strong purpose. But
Mm-hmm.
when your time, energy, and attention is diverted away from the bureaucracy and the system that's the NHS, and
Mm.
wading through treacle, then all of a sudden you forget about making a difference to patients. Even though you are, it's very easy to forget about that, and everything just becomes an uphill task. The other thing to say, and I can't remember whether we spoke about this already. We have spoken about it in the past. Is that unless you're creating your own opportunity to grow and develop both personally and professionally, the system won't create that for you. So when you're a trainee, the growth pathway is all laid out for you. You follow the path, you get your head down, you work hard, you go through the exams, you go through your rotations. It's all a nice path for you. That path is a lot more murky when you're a GP or consultant. And in fact, there's no path at all. You kind of have to create your own path. So unless colleagues recognize that there's a risk, even though they got to the top of the tree And even though they're successful externally, there is a risk as a consultant and as a GP of loss of purpose, number one. And secondly, if growth is important to you, there is a risk that you are no longer growing and you're going to become stagnated. And we see this from doctors, the conversations I've had, what I've had, that you've had, we see this time and time again.
Yeah, I mean, I'm also guessing that doctors become doctors, and this is something that I've heard many times, is that, it's a secure job. I know I'll be fine. But I suppose there's a tipping point, isn't it, when safety or the security stops being security and starts almost being like a cage, really. You feel sort of trapped in this cage. And I've spoken to a couple of consultant doctors where they sort of go, oh, I've got all this stuff to do. And I said to them, well, do you have to do all that stuff? And they said, well, no, I do this, but I'm not getting paid for it. So, well, why do you have to do it then? Well, I suppose I don't really. So why do you do it? Maybe what would happen if you didn't? And I know that having spoken to you, there have been things that you've ducked out of that before you might have felt that you were committed to. But again, this is the thing. This is the question. Is it a career change or is it a life change, or how we approach our life change?
Yeah, I think there's a few great points. Thank you for suggesting that. I think there's a few points that I just want to mention at this stage. The first thing, you talked about security, but then being in a cage. So I recognized when I was a consultant that one of the reasons why I went into medicine was because it is a safe route. My parents were business owners. They almost lost their business in the 1992 recession. And I remember the stress coming home
Yeah.
from work, and they were not in a good place. I could just tell. I was only 14 at the time, but I could just tell.
Yeah.
So when there's an opportunity to combine something which you think is going to be interesting, like a medical career, with that security, then obviously at that point it's an attractive proposition. But the world's changed and the medical environment's changed. I think doctors are high earners, but at the same time, they are not particularly financially literate.
No.
We're not going to talk about money on this particular podcast episode, but money does play a part, because when you think to yourself, I've got a stable career, then it almost gives you the excuse to ignore money completely. You talk about
Absolutely.
putting money in the corner. And once we do that, then obviously then we are relying on a single system, which is basically
Mhm.
our job and our pension at the end of it,
Yeah.
to look after us. Now, if we're talking about creating options, there are some doctors, for example, that are now doing portfolio careers or side businesses, etc. But if you've attached to just one stream of income, being a doctor, and that you don't like what's happening, and you haven't really got any control over the pay because that's all national contract. So there has been pay erosion over quite a few number of years. The BMA are talking about this all the time. One of the big drivers for balloting for industrial action. Then all of a sudden, you don't have any options other than just to work harder, which in my case burnt me out a few years ago. So one of the things we're talking about, feeling trapped in a cage, is if you're not financially clued up, then you are going to be more reactive and you're going to feel a bit trapped. So that's the first thing to say.
Well, and I think what's interesting with that is that, people talk about the golden handcuffs and all that kind of stuff, is that, you know that you paid well, you've created a lifestyle to match. And I think there's a lot of stuff that comes along with being a doctor, both reality and possibly fantasy as well. And I'm wondering, I mean, how much of a doctor's identity becomes wrapped up in being a doctor?
Well, this is the other thing I was going to talk about. So the other thing I'm going to talk about is that there is a cultural mindset issue as well.
Mm.
So let's supposing I feel a bit stuck, and I'm a consultant. I've got all of these extra things that I've been asked to do. So I'm the new consultant that comes in, and there's all of my colleagues are saying, "Oh, I think there's an opportunity to do this. It would be great, I think, if you're involved." why don't you do it? Why don't you consider doing it? And obviously, when you just want to fit in, don't you?
Of
You
course
don't want
you
to be
do.
the one that doesn't pull their weight in the department. So when I became a consultant, I saw all these people doing all these pockets of different things. Some of them were great,
Yeah.
others were maybe not as interesting to me. But I must admit, I did feel, because it took me a few years to transition into it. I wasn't doing an awful lot else. I didn't have any formal roles. I thought, all right, I probably should do something, because at some point someone's going to say something to me saying that I'm not pulling my weight as a consultant. So the interesting thing there is that we've only got a certain number of time in the day. And if let's supposing we are financially stretched, let's supposing we've got some business ideas. I'm not saying everyone does, but let's supposing we want to do something a bit different.
Hmm.
Then we have to not just create and carve out a bit of time to be able to do that. We also have to navigate the the culture. We don't want to be labeled as being someone that's not pulling their weight. How do we navigate that? Particularly when you see your colleagues that are doing stuff, and there's almost a feeling of guilt that I should be like them, but actually doing what they're doing or doing something similar, it's just making me miserable. And so a lot of doctors feel stuck because I suppose they feel it's probably fear of maybe of judgment, or fear of some form of social rejection or something like that. And even now, even because obviously we're now about 18 months or 2 years into building Medics in Control, even now when I'm at work, I still get that thought that's in my mind to say, are you doing enough? What are people going to think of you? It still happens to me right now. I've just learned to recognize, actually, I can go with that thought, but if I'm starting to do things that are not necessarily going to serve me, I'm just going to stay trapped. So I've learned to acknowledge those thoughts and then just say, okay, thank you, but I need to do this because I see the benefits to not just me, but the people around me of what we're trying to create here. Does that make sense?
It does, yes. So I'm sort of hearing a little bit of comparisonitis.
There's a lot of comparisonitis.
Um,
And the fear of judgment as well. There's a lot of that. Despite the fact that we're all supposed to work in, being in a collegiate environment, I have to be honest. I was on a consultant week last week, and it's not actually putting criticism on anyone. I was just really keeping a close eye on what people were saying, just throwaway comments and things like that. It's amazing how much judgment there is, even though we don't even think about it. And all it takes is one person to say one thing, and that can put us into a, I'm not doing something, and that can change your entire trajectory of what you want to do or not do, for that matter.
okay, let's bring it back to why so many doctors feel stuck. I think we've sort of a lot of the whys, unless there's anything else you want to add to that. Because I think if we were to
Well,
sum it up,
I think the only
we're
thing,
look
yeah.
we're looking at a kind of I'm not going to say toxic culture, but a kind of culture that's it just doesn't sound fun, really. It sounds like it's like I was thinking about a consultant doctor, I would have this little fantasy of seeing, an old man in a really nice posh coat carrying along a little doctor's case who comes along to see a patient, says, "Take some notes for me, will you, assistant?" and then spend some of his time on the golf course with a glass of whiskey in his hand. Do you know what I mean? That was a sort of fantasy of the consultant doctor, right? And what I get from talking to consultant doctors now, it's not anywhere near that at all.
No.
And in fact, it's a case of, write your own bloody notes, get to work, see all these different patients. No, there's not the recognition that's deemed to be the kind of recognition or the respect that consultant doctors would get,
Hmm.
etc. And it's a completely different. You're in a blue coat or whatever color coat it is, green coat, whatever it is, the same color as everybody else, and you're just going in to do a job. And it doesn't have that kind of status. Yeah, it just doesn't have what it was
Yeah.
supposed to have, apart from possibly without us thinking about wages not having gone up over time, a pay packet that is above beyond many other people, many other of your colleagues. Right. But I can understand the frustration, because I would also possibly would think that would come up in this conversation, that something that I've definitely heard is that, well, I feel like this, but I shouldn't, because I'm paid well and
Mm.
essentially I've got a great job, etc. So there's this kind of thing of like, I do feel like this, but I'm now in denial for feeling like that, which is even worse, really.
Yeah.
Because if you sort of think, I really shouldn't feel like this, because actually look at me compared to everybody else, I've got all this stuff. But let's move on, unless there's anything you want to add to that.
But there's a few things. I mean, I think we have to recognise that the NHS has changed. I think when I started in
Yeah.
2004, there was a lot more focus on the doctor and the patient. Over the last 22 years since I've been in medicine, a lot of it has now become very target driven, system driven. There seems to be a lot more systems and process and protocols and guidelines, etc.
But
Probably
we
one
live in
place
that
to start.
culture,
Sorry?
don't we? We live in that culture. I mean, the
Yeah.
population has grown
Well,
exponentially.
this is it.
We've got people from different cultures, different languages. There's all sorts of different needs, special educational needs, special needs, mental health, everything that we had back in 2004 of
Mm.
magnify and add a whole load of stuff into the spectrum as well. I think I think it's inevitable that the NHS is going to change, and it has to change along the way.
Well, it is, but there's a difference. Consultants used to have sway in how services were delivered. They
Yes, I get
they are
that.
very much definitely not the case now. There's
No.
a number of consultants that tell me, and I completely resonate with this, they feel like they're a small cog in a big machine. So that they
Which, for all intents and purposes, they are.
well, you could argue that, but that never used to be like that.
No.
The other thing to say is that you mentioned about admin support. You mentioned about the doctor, the consultant, that people used to do their scribing and go off to the golf course. I had that. I had the experience of that. Not personally, but when I was a house officer in 2004, this is exactly what my consultant did. He came in to do the ward round. There were other people writing notes. He was there to be consulted. That's where the name
Yes.
consultant comes from. And then he said, I'm off to play. He actually said this, I'm off to play golf. Don't hesitate not to contact me. But obviously you can if there's a problem, right? Okay, so that's what it used to be. The expectations have changed. The admin support is no longer there. So you're finding consultants are doing more and more of their time engaging with admin related
Yeah.
tasks. And in addition to that, it drives me mad, I have to say. These additional low value tick box exercises that have no value to consultants, but they're only for the organization. Things like appraisal paperwork, mandatory training, all of that sort of stuff, which all it does is takes people's time away
Right.
from the bedside and everything. The other thing to say, and it's relevant to this, is a lot of doctors say they haven't got any time.
Yes,
Okay, and the
exactly.
reason why they haven't got any time is because, number one, they're engaging in all the extra admin. But the other thing to do is that, and we haven't really talked about this yet, when you're a trainee, you want to impress other people because your role is to get that consultant job. Okay,
Mhm.
reputation is everything as a trainee. You don't want big people talk. And when you go for consultant interview, you don't want to say, yeah, it looks great on the CV, but this trainee doesn't pull their weight. So it's all about impressing other people. When you're a consultant, you've got that job security. You don't have to impress anyone else. But the mindset, I need to people please all the time, is still there. And
Okay.
this is why a lot of colleagues are engaging. I'm not saying not to do what you're contracted to do. I'm not saying that. What I'm saying is over delivering. So in other words, giving your time up for free because
Yeah.
of system inefficiencies. But the reason why they're the system inefficiencies is because there's no funding, there's not enough funding to support that system in the first place. So all of that weight and all of that pressure falls on doctors' shoulders, which just exacerbates the problem, in my opinion.
Right. So essentially, I mean, this is why we hear it again and again that doctors look after their patients much better than they look after themselves. So what I'm very keen for this not to be is just a moan
No,
fest,
it's not a moan fest, no.
right?
But it's important that people understand. It's important that
It
people
is.
understand,
It
what's
is.
actually happening.
So I think we should slide into a little bit here without it being any kind of promotion or advert into the fact that what we like to do is we like to say 20 minutes a day, don't we? Tell us about that, Jamie.
Yeah, so this principle really relates to the fact that there's a hell of a lot in our jobs and our circumstances that we can't change. But if we get to a place of acceptance that things are what they are,
Yeah.
then all of a sudden we are clearing a bit of headspace and we're clearing a bit of time perhaps into doing the things that we can control. So we're refocusing our time, energy, and focus away from the things that we can't control. So I appreciate that there's lots of inefficiency in the NHS. There's lots
Mhm.
of, there may be judgments and other people talking and things like that. But if we just accept things for what they are and then refocus our time and energy on the things that we can control. Now, we both know that there are four key characteristics that, when they're all working together, can unlock all sorts of opportunities. Because what we're really talking about in this conversation is doctors who feel stuck. And the reason why they feel stuck is because they don't have any agency and control into their personal and professional life.
Yeah.
So, in order to reclaim agency and control, you could do a lot worse than to start working on yourself. Now, the issues that we have is that doctors are very headspace poor and they're also very time poor as well. And they've got lots of commitments, not just at work, but also at home. I mean, you may have family and kids and all sorts of things. There's lots of things that are competing for your attention, which is why we say if you can just carve out 20 minutes for yourself, for your personal development, then you can start making traction. It doesn't happen straight away, but 20 minutes a day is almost 2 hours a week. 2 hours a week is over 100 hours a year, which is a lot of time when you think about it.
Yeah,
Okay.
absolutely.
And what you can do in that 20 minutes is going to be variable. I would say that, first of all, the people that feel a bit overwhelmed or a bit too busy and haven't got the time, maybe a bit anxious, the first thing I would do is just spend that 20 minutes just sitting and doing nothing.
I was gonna ask you actually what you do with 20 minutes a day, and I
Yeah.
think that's always the first stop.
I mean, that's the first thing I would do because
You
we,
but you see, and this is a conversation that we've had before with many, many doctors, is that they're very good human doings
Mhm.
and very poor human beings.
Yeah, right.
Sorry, very poor at being human beings.
At being human beings. Yeah. So,
Yeah.
so in case anyone hasn't come across that, Fanny, do you want to just explain what you mean?
Well, yeah, so, I mean, we all have many of us have to-do lists. "I gotta do this, I gotta do this, I've gotta do this, I've gotta do this," and we constantly serve the to-do list, our patients, our families, our friends, and we spend very little time considering and noticing and paying attention to, proper attention to who we are being. What
Mm.
kind of person am I being? Am I being a person that is just approaching everything with a bit of a, sort of like, oh, gotta do this, gotta do that. It's like, how do we, it's called ontological approach, the way of being. And I think that taking time to pause and thinking about who we are as people is very valuable. I spoke to a doctor yesterday and I was talking to him about the Doctor's Breakthrough Program and how it might be good. He goes, "Yeah, but do you know what? I'm just thinking, do I sign up for another course?" And I said, "Yes, but when was the last time that you signed up for a course whereby you were not trying to chase a new business or think of a different income stream or working more and actually spend time on yourself?" And he looked at me straight in the eye and he went, "Never,
Mm.
never." And I said, "Well, maybe this is the time to actually take some time and think about who you are." And that's really, if you can take 20 minutes a day to focus on yourself, on who you are and who you are not being, then you have a chance to approach the same situations that you may have to day in, day out, but you may be able to approach them differently because you have control over your internal locus of control rather than the external locus of control, which are the things outside of you that you can't control. And we found that the people that do this over and over again see significant differences.
Mm. Yeah. And I think what you're describing there is it's very difficult just to walk away from your job. A lot of people are
Of course.
financially trapped.
It's
And
a
you don't,
massive decision as
you
well.
probably don't, it's a massive decision. And you probably really, when you dig down, you might not want to do that because you don't, the grass isn't always greener. Okay. So I think what you're describing there is almost a short term approach by changing the way you think, the way you act, the way you behave, irrespective of circumstances, so that the stuff that you're doing, the environment that you're hanging out with every single day is you're just in a much better state.
Yeah.
Instead of being overwhelmed, you're feeling calm. You've got clarity of mind. And all of a sudden, when you've got calmness and clarity of mind, then you are less reactive to the environment around you.
Yeah.
So
And
I
you know
think,
what? There are probably going to be people, doctors who listen to this, who may just not even be able to imagine that right
yeah,
now.
exactly. So for me, that would be the first starting point. But obviously, for me, that's just not. I don't think that's enough on its own. I think that's definitely the place to start, 100%, because you can't really do anything if you haven't got a bit of clear headspace. So you need
Yeah.
that clear headspace, and you need to start off with on a level playing field where you have got that strong foundation and that clarity and peace of mind. So I think that's
Mhm.
important. But then after that, then what you need to think about doing is you want to start reclaiming control by starting to do things which are more aligned to where you want to be. So often that starts with looking at your overall direction and actually not just in your career, but also tapping into the things which naturally, we talked about energy earlier. What are the things that naturally energize you?
Yeah.
I remember the thought years ago. I mean, I'm a keen runner now, but the years ago, the thought of doing. I wasn't very active, and the thought of doing exercise, I wasn't that interested in. And I remember taking up a hobby of playing squash and going on the squash court. It was effortless compared to all the other activities that I was doing. And I think it's not, it's not just for sport. It's for everything. When you're spending time on something that naturally energizes you,
Yeah.
then it's effortless. So, but the thing
Yeah.
is, unless you're stopping and if you're continuously doing, then you're not going to be able to see that. Okay, so the reason why we say start from a place of being is because all of a sudden you got that clear headspace, and then you can take a step back and ask yourself, well, what are the bits of medicine that I enjoy, and what are the bits that I don't enjoy, and can we start realigning our time away from the things that we might not have to do,
Yeah.
but we do because everyone else is doing them, towards the things that are naturally energizing us. For example,
Well, hold on. I know you want to give an example, but I'm going to stop you there because we're running out of time. And also, we're going to talk about all of this in another podcast where we're going to really talk about how we can move forward. But
mm,
just a very light touch here we're going to be obviously at the end of this podcast, you're going to hear about our community, which is free to join, but also keep an eye out for something we call the Doctor's Reset, which is
mm,
coming up soon, which is a really light touch. And it's a little event that we run for charity. We're not going to talk about it too much today, but it's something that, come and join us and come and do it. And it's a few days where we ask you to just try on the 20 minutes a day and see how it works for you. So I think really let's not talk too much about that because in our next upcoming episodes, we're going to talk about that more and we're running up to time now.
yeah, no, I
So,
get that. Yeah. And thank you for saying that. I do have a tendency of going, "Oh, it's only because
but
I'm really, it's only because
I
I'm really
think the
passionate
main,
about this, and I can
I know you are.
see,
And I think,
and I can see the potential. I can see how many people are trapped. Yet doctors are so, they're such great people under the surface.
Yeah. And I was going to acknowledge that. I was going to acknowledge that, we need doctors. You're all fantastic people. And we acknowledge that, when you feel stuck and you feel like there's no way out, we just want to say that there is.
Mm.
And that's what we're here to do. Medics in Control, a little bit of a clue in the title. So, follow along with us and come and join the community. And let's all be a support for you. And let's help get you unstuck.
Yeah, I think that's important. One thing before we sign off, if I may, what I found really challenging when I was at the lowest was I didn't have any support of people that understood where I was.
Yeah,
Okay?
exactly.
And there's nothing more isolating
Yeah,
when you're in, when you're in that situation where you feel stuck and you don't feel that people understand you. Often the response was, "That's just life. Get on with it. It's the same for everyone." And
yeah,
I suppose that what I want to say before we sign off is that it doesn't have to be that way, because we've
good.
got a community now where we are committed to get people to reclaim agency and control over their professional and personal lives.
Yeah,
And the reason why the 20 minutes a day is important is because this is exactly what I did when I was stuck back in 2022.
exactly.
I know it works. And not only that, we've had now people that have done our Doctor's Breakthrough program who swear by the 20-minute day principle as well. So
Yeah.
that's, I suppose, all we're going to say for this particular episode, Fanny. Yeah, come and come and join us. We've got a Doctor Reset which starts on the 6th of July, goes to the 11th of July. It's £30 to enter, and it's all for a good cause because all proceeds go to UK Doc Charity, who are a charity that support doctors' well-being. And it's so for us, it's all aligned with what we want to do anyway. So,
Yeah.
any final words, Fanny, before we wrap up?
No, I think that's all we're done. We'll see everybody next time.
Lovely. All right. Take care. Thanks, Fanny.
Take care.